Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to this webinar. And we thank you for being with us for the last two sessions also. And this is the third session on the feedback session on the guide that is prepared and shared for all of you. And thank you for being with us today. And I leave the floor for Dr. Rooks for welcome. Dr. Rooks, over to you.
Thank you so much, Yerus. Also, other colleagues from UNESCO IGBA, also Suchit and colleagues who have worked so hard on getting this document to this stage. I recognize your efforts. Also to the young peace builders who have also been part of this journey, particularly on this segment towards the preparation of this manual. This is the third youth dialogue directly connected to its development. I want to thank you all also for the time you've taken out to join us in these dialogues, and also for the time, at least for those of you who have shared your feedback. It's a bulky document, and we recognize that it's taken quite a bit of time. But permit me to spend a minute or two talking about our responsibilities. This is one of those situations where the UNESCO IGBA and the AU, through its Youth for Peace Africa program, is working on this document that should foster and capacity building for youth in relation to participating in peace building, but it's also an opportunity for young people themselves to be a part of this process, to not be simply beneficiaries, but also a part of that evolutionary process. So as much as I thank you for being a part of it, I want you to also recognize it as a responsibility, and one that should be taken seriously, more so when you consider that this manual is not simply for the consumption of UNESCO IGBA or the AU, but for the benefit of youth across the continent, which you have to a large extent represented in this evolutionary process. Having said that, today what we seek to do is get your feedback verbally. We recognize that many of you have already provided feedback through email and the online form as well, the feedback form. But today we also want to have this discussion wherein those ideas that may not have been adequately or properly captured in text can be taken on board, and also to elicit rich discussions on the points that you may have raised in your feedback that would generate further discussion between and amongst colleagues. So please feel free to reflect on things you have said previously and things that come to mind even as the conversations mature. As you all know, this is a safe space, and this is what we're encouraging to ensure that all we do is fit for purpose. So I would like to thank you once again for being here, and I am looking forward to another fruitful outcome from these deliberations. I thank you. Jerusalem, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Rooks, and thank you for reminding us that this is a space that we will provide our feedback and just to enrich the guide and to see how it can be used later on. And maybe without any further delay, I will hand over to Suchit to lead us on the agenda. Suchit, over to you.
Thank you, Jerusalem. Yes, so we are meeting again today for the third of our dialogues, and this dialogue specifically focuses on gaining feedback from young leaders on the draft of the guide, but also to create a space for you to look at how you can practically use this beyond, as a resource in your work, in your context. So hopefully the time today can be fruitful in terms of enriching the guide further so that it becomes a relevant tool, a relevant resource for young people across Africa. At the same time, for you to, for yourself, identify opportunities to utilize it in your context. With that in mind, what we have planned is to have space mostly for you to speak and for you to give us inputs and feedback. But I also like this term feed forward in a way so that your input, not just to put up responses to what we have there, but also to feed your own ideas in. So in a way to take things forward from where they are, building on what is already there. So I love this idea of feeding forward, then sometimes then feeding back. So I hope that you do take this opportunity and really share your reflections and critically. And again, as Dr. Rooks mentioned, this is a safe space. We are not going to take any feedback in a negative way or become defensive because of it. So feel free to speak your mind and give relevant feedback as how it is, how you see it, and how it can impact you. So after this introduction, we'll have a short icebreaker, something to get you to start speaking, because as I said, the whole point of today is to hear from you what you think. To start off that process, we thought that it's important that you get an overview of the guide. Not maybe all of you might have had the opportunity to go through it. So we'll give a very quick overview, going through what is there, so that you get that overview. And then we want to have more maybe group work, where in smaller groups we can discuss, go through the different chapters and see what are your inputs for that. So you can give feedback in terms of what is the language, is the focus something relevant for you, is the style of language that is it something that you resonate with, and then as we go section by section or chapter by chapter, what do you think are any additions that you would like to propose, any changes you would like to see in that chapter? We welcome to receive those. And then lastly, how can this guide become more relevant for your context? When you go through it, do you find the connection to your reality? If not, what can be done to enhance that more and more? We've attempted to do that by bringing in case studies and experiences from different parts of Africa, but of course that can be enhanced more, and specifically if we can receive inputs and case studies from you. So that will really enrich the resource for everybody. So that's going to be about 40 minutes that we'll have in groups. Once we come back, then we'll have time to go through together and hear from each group about what were some of the main highlights. You don't need to report back and all the feedback that maybe is recorded. Again, just to take note also that in the groups, there'll be a facilitator who will have the guide open like this, and they will take you through chapter by chapter, and they'll take necessary notes on the document as comments or edit to the text, so that we record all your inputs as well. Then we come back and share and reflect further what can we do to improve this guide. Hopefully we are on time, and then we have a short break, and then we come back to have a discussion. Jerusalem will host us in a discussion about how can we use this guide? How can we use it in our existing work? Or is there any further strengthening of young people's engagement in education for peace building that can happen, leveraging on this guide? So we have space to discuss that. And then finally to identify some concrete next steps and the closings of the webinar. So that's sort of what is planned for today. And I hope it will be engaging for you as well. To start off that process, as I said, a small icebreaker. I want to start off by interactive activity, and the whole purpose of this activity is to hear your voices and to for you to be able to be creative as well. So I want to everybody to pump up their creative energy. We are going to collectively narrate a story. I don't know whether you've done this as a kid, maybe long time ago, what is going to happen is that one person start off the story with a sentence, and the story, then the next person takes over the next sentence to the story. So for example, I might start off saying once upon a time, and then the next person might say there lived a young woman, and then the third person would add the next sentence. So the imagination, where the story might end up is all up to you, and how our creative juices flow today. So that's how we are going to play it. Anybody who wants to jump in and start the process? Dr. Rooks, you mentioned that you might be interested to start. Can I invite you to start off with the first sentence of the story?
Sure, Suchit. So do I start with the once upon a time?
No, you're free to start off as you want.
Okay, I think I'll start off with something that reflects on this exercise. So I would say, once upon a time, UNESCO, IGBA, and AU came together to promote YPS.
And then Dr. Rooks, you can nominate somebody to go next. Let's do that so that.
Suchit, in doing this, perhaps what we should do is just use the list. Will it be, or do I just call anyone?
You can call anyone maybe, and we can just note who it wasn't called on before.
Okay, so once upon a time, UNESCO and the AU came together.
Hello, Rooks.
Yes.
Can you say it again, because your voice was breaking, but I heard you.
I said once upon a time, UNESCO, IGBA, and the AU came together on a project to advance YPS.
So I continue, right?
Yes.
So they organize this huge feast that the youth can express their ideas, their views, and their views and their comments on what is workable for the youth program. Over to Imiko.
Yes, and there were a lot of youth interested in this event. Next, okay, who should I? Cyprian, please.
Cyprian?
Is he there?
Cyprian, can you hear us? You're muted right now. Maybe we go for somebody else and come back to him. And
yeah. Okay. What about Ayobayo, please? Abade, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. The interested youth jumped on numerous calls, jumped on the first and the second call, and here we are at the third call. Can Joseph Akilimali take over?
Oui. Oui. Et les jeunes ont pris l'initiative.
Yes, and youth took the initiative to continue the work with its activity in different countries and its respective countries. Did you hear me?
Do you understand?
Yes. We also have English interpretation on the English channel if anyone wants to hear the translation. Yes, we did hear you. Thank you.
Joseph, if you can recommend the next person, to invite the next person.
La personne suivante, c'est Enoch.
The next person
Enoch is the next one, please.
Enoch, are you there? I don't know whether Enoch is there for...
Yeah, Kevin.
Or Kevin. Or Abu Bakr.
Or Abu Bakr.
Yeah.
Abu Bakr, Mohammed, are you there? You're muted right now. We don't hear from Abu Bakr. So shall we go for somebody else? Maybe quickly I'll call on Corazon. Corazon, can you take over?
Okay, thank you. So when the youth started, they implemented the activities in their various countries, and the activities picked up and the youth in their communities learned a lot. Thank you. I pick the next person, Catherine Collins.
Merci. Donc, les activités ont permis
Thank you.
Excellent. So the activities
allow
allowed
to sensibilize youth to be actors in their
let a lot
environment.
of youth know that they can be an actor of peace
Safi.
in their environment.
Catherine, can you call on somebody else?
Cyprien Chenani?
And I'll call on Cyprien.
Cyprien Chenani.
Cyprien Chenani.
Cyprian, do you hear us? Can you take over? You're muted right now. We don't get a response from Cyprian. So can we go to maybe Nyasha? Can we invite Nyasha? Nyasha, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think.
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Yes, it was more to ensure that young people can find spaces in which they can actively take part, but not take the back seat where they are only, you know, looking at being beneficiaries, having direct support from, the organizers of the project, but themselves being part of the mainstream actors who propose and also present solutions that will also ensure that the agenda for peace and security across the world is also inclusive and has got that aspect of gender equality and also youth equal participation. Thank you.
Who are you calling next, Nyasha?
Let me call Nicholas.
Hi guys. So then my section would be in recognition of the work conducted by the Youth Guide, young people were invited to present their work at the UN. And then I will call on, who hasn't gone yet?
We have Apubo, Norit, Hannah.
I'll go with Apubo. Good head.
Apubo.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, so the youth came together to discuss ways in which they could be involved in the peace building processes. And
there's a bit of background noise as you speak. It's difficult to make out. Something seems to be tapping.
Okay, let me.
You can be a bit louder, then we'll be able to hear you.
Hello.
Yeah, if you can speak a bit louder, maybe you can hear you over the background noise.
Can you hear me now?
We can make out. So please go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, can I go next then? Let me try sorting this out.
Okay, we can maybe go to Hannah and then come back to Apubo. Hannah, would you like to share as well?
Oh, okay, sorry, I was muted. So the youth have come together to discuss this agenda and share their comments today.
Suchit, you are muted.
Orith, would you like to add on as well?
Okay. So after deciding to meet this year, 2021, to continue with the next dialogue, the youth and the AU direct feedback from the leaders of the youth.
Okay. Shall we come back to Apubo? Are you able to speak? Apubo, can you try now?
Can you hear me better?
Please go ahead, Apubo.
So the youth came together to discuss ways in which they could impact the process of peace building and how it impacts on their lives.
Okay, I think we heard from everybody. Is there anybody who wasn't invited to share? I think we did. We didn't hear from Cyprian. Cyprian, are you there? No. So thank you. It's sort of inspiring. I didn't imagine the story to be on this process itself. And so thank you, Dr. Rooks, for kind of inviting us to vision what is the outcome of this process and where does the process that we are working on, where can it lead, how can it inspire us to reach higher. So thank you. It was inspiring to hear the story from everyone and the collective narration of the story. Let us move forward. And I'm going to next take you through a short overview of the guide. And that's sort of what we are gathered here today for. Sorry, are you able to see the document? Okay, I hope everybody can see the document clearly.
Yes, it's up on the screen, Suchit, yes.
Great. So the first point is that how we frame the guide. It's framed and titled as a youth guide on education for peace building. And maybe there are inputs on this as you go into the groups later on. You can also suggest if there should be any inputs, or is this clear what the purpose of this is. I'll expand a bit on this idea of education for peace building. There are different terminologies being used: education for peace, education, peace education. But we picked the title of education for peace building because we actually want to see the young people who are engaged in this process, the learners who are engaged in this process, being active peace builders. So it's not just to educate them about peace, but they actually taking actions and in a transformative way, becoming peace builders themselves at their own capacities in their own context. So that's the specific terminology we picked to focus on of education for peace building. Again, as you go into the groups, maybe that's where you can start off with giving any inputs and feedback or thoughts to this as well. And feel free to share your comments as I go through these on the chat as well, so that we can gather those as well. Then who is the target audience for this? The guide was intended to be used by young people, youth leaders across Africa. They're the target audience, and specifically young youth leaders who are working with youth organizations, and then also specifically because of the background of ICBA, teacher trainees or youth in the education sector. We have many young people studying to or being trained to become teachers in teacher training institutions in universities. So with the mandate that the ICBA has to further education and the capacity of teachers, they become also a very crucial target group for using this resource going forward. So it's with that group in mind that we've articulated this language of what we've put together in this resource. And what are then the objectives of the guide? The guide aims to enhance critical reflections on the role of young people in building peace and prevention of violence through education. So helping young people think of what is the role of education to prevent violence and build peace through education. The second objective then is to introduce transformative pedagogy to strengthen critical understandings, skills, and collaborative actions among young people to foster peace building. So we want this not to be, we want this to be holistic learning experience that touches the mind, heart, and hands, that there are new understandings, new skills getting built in the process, and then there is action by young people as well. And we need to introduce pedagogy that can be used. Pedagogy meaning educational approaches that can really empower young people that education sometimes often is lagging behind in. So we really want to build that capacity through this process or through the guide. Thank you for joining. Enhance youth capacities to develop educational programs to promote dialogue and mutual understanding and respect in their community. So we want the young people involved to really be able to use this as a resource to talk about the role of education, but also how we can promote dialogue and mutual understanding and respect in their own context. Then lastly, to provide examples of youth-led experiences and actions, as well as good practices on youth empowerment and mobilizations. So to bring in concrete examples of how this is happening already across Africa, how young people are championing peace building initiatives in the education sector through education, and to showcase those good case practices. So that was like the overall objectives of the guide. As I said, I'm just going through the different parts of the guide. If you have any questions in the meantime, do use the chat and raise those. So I'll keep an eye out for any questions that pop up and try to address them as well. And then you will have time to give feedback in the groups. So what are the different parts that the whole guide includes then? There is, of course, an introduction that we will probably build on further, but at this point, this is a draft that everybody can contribute to. It's a working draft of this document. The introduction tries to outline the purpose of the guide and what are the objectives, as I explained, and how it can be used by who, etc., and how we work together to develop this guide. Then we go into the first chapter. The first chapter looks to give an overview of the dynamics of youth engagement in peace and on issues of violence across Africa. This chapter was authored by one of the participants in the first dialogue, Hubert, who's currently living in Kenya, but he's originally from Cameroon. He helped us and he authored this first chapter, giving an overall overview as a young researcher of how he sees peace-building dynamics and issues of violence, what sort of types of violence manifest, and what are some of the crucial issues behind the root causes behind this violence, building on some of the reflections from the first dialogue that we had. Chapter 2 then talks about what is the role of education. If this is the context, these are the dynamics, then what is the role of education in contributing to peace building? Chapter 3 then talks about the pedagogy or the educational approach that can really strengthen. If that's the role, how should we do it, is what chapter 3 talks about. Chapter 4 then is a user's guide. It's a more practical, it's a bridge between the conceptual parts that are in the first 3 chapters and the practical activities that are in the chapter 5. So it tries to highlight how you can use some of these approaches in building a program that's responsive to the needs of your context, but uses this transformative approach, transformative pedagogy approach that UNESCO ICBA is championing and introducing. And then, as I mentioned, Chapter 5 includes practical activities that can be used in different contexts, adapted to your context. It just gives outline and suggested set of activities that young people can use to strengthen their programs. And this is offered in 2 different modules in that chapter. And lastly, then there is Chapter 6, which tries to introduce the concept of monitoring the progress of these educational programs that young people will implement, how to do that, what is important to monitor, and what are some of the tools that can be used for the monitoring process. So that's the different components of the guide. Then I can quickly jump and take you just a bit of overview of each chapter. As I said, the first chapter talks about the dynamics of peace and violence across Africa. It starts with highlighting the states of peace and violence in Africa, highlighting some of the key aspects in terms of what is going on across Africa, some of the policy frameworks that are relevant. It talks about the Silence is the Gun initiative of the African Union, and then several other regional mechanisms to sub-regional mechanisms that are bringing young people together. It also starts to highlight some of the overall dynamics that see types of violence that occur, including violent conflict, armed conflicts, gender-based violence, human rights violations, disasters that take place. So in a way, trying to open up and expand what types of violence occurs across Africa, and then in specific regions, what are some of the specific dynamics, highlighting some of the main actors that drive conflict and contribute to violent extremism as well. And then the next part of this chapter talks about the impact these dynamics have on youth. How do youth fit into this reality across Africa? So the author tries to highlight the demographics of young people across Africa and how they are impacted by these dynamics, and how they are actually also responding to these dynamics across Africa. It tries to also frame violence beyond the immediate or the direct manifestation of what we imagine is physical or visible forms of violence, to also expand our understanding of violence towards both the structural and cultural manifestations that continue to be part of the root causes that drive conflicts and are why the violence cycles of violence continue in our communities. There is also some reference to the current dynamics with the restrictions on COVID-19 and how that's impacting young people especially. And then lastly, it talks about what can young people do, or what is the role of young people in building peace and preventing violence, highlighting some of the initiatives that young people highlighting already how young people are engaged in contributing to different initiatives, and how young people are sometimes at the front of tackling some of these big challenges across the region. So as I said, this chapter's main purpose is to give an overview of what's going on. We have received some feedback that maybe it's very detailed and maybe we can simplify it, but we would love to hear from you as well in the group what you think about how the introductory, the first chapter frames the issue for us to explore. Then if I can take you to the second chapter, it talks about the role of education for peace building. It tries to introduce how is education trying to respond to these dynamics across Africa, and what is the role that education needs to play to ensure that we build peaceful societies and peaceful communities. I'll quickly jump here. There is a summary of that that highlights different components of the role, including how education needs to contribute to building knowledge and skills that can respond to these challenges, that young people can really become actors in change in their communities. So they may have the necessary knowledge, they have the critical understandings, they have the skill sets to communicate and resolve problems and address the challenges that they're facing working together. It looks to education has to strengthen the social cohesion. It needs to contribute towards appreciating the diversity among our different communities and strengthening how we live together in our nations, in our countries, in the region, ensuring that our differences do not drive us to conflict and violence, but rather enables us to build more inclusive and democratic approaches to living together and building inclusive societies. Education also should build resilience. It highlights how important that the preventative aspect of building resilience in young people so that they do not get recruited into or manipulated into more extreme or violent ideologies. It highlights the importance of engaging the community and the wider school. So if we are talking about formal education, not limiting it to the classroom, but the whole school in the context of the community, engaging the whole community in the process, seeing them as partners in education and not having education excluded or run separate from the reality around them, seeing how each can strengthen each other, community contributing to the educational initiatives as well as the educational initiatives giving back to the community and building peace in the community. And lastly, the role of education in highlighting holistic approach to education that also puts the social-emotional learning that's crucial for peace and prevention of violence at the heart of the educational process. So that's some of the key dynamics highlighted in this chapter. Again, if there are inputs in terms of what you think can be further strengthened, what are maybe aspects that are not so highlighted, that is what we will look forward to hearing from you as we go to the next step. We've introduced one case study here. So throughout the guide, we wanted to introduce different case studies. There is a case study each introduced with chapter 2 and 3. And then at the moment, there is more case studies parked at the end of the guide, but we want to try to see where they best fit in as well. That gives practical examples. This particular case study is from Tanzania of how school-based peace clubs are enabling young people to really respond to peace building and become agents of peace in their communities, including advocating for peace, violence prevention, running campaigns around preventing election violence, addressing issues of gender-based discrimination, etc. Chapter 3 is when we talk about transformative pedagogy. Again, Paulo Freire talks about education either functions as an instrument which is used to facilitate integration of the younger generation into logic of the present system, or it becomes the practice of freedom. I think that is very much the principle of transformative pedagogy, a liberative approach that goes beyond the limits of what is there, but to really empower young people so that they can meet the challenges and build a shared future for themselves, and educational approaches that can enable that is what we refer to as transformative pedagogy. In that, we highlight several key approaches that we've developed with UNESCO ICBA and has been part of the heart of the teacher training processes that we've been involving in. And those are context sensitivity, creating safe learning environment, ensuring that our educational activities are participatory and collaborative, and the importance of role modeling, the whole school approach or the whole community approach, and then lastly, supporting learner-led actions or youth-led actions. The image here I've inserted here right now just to help summarize the different components, but we will see an updated version of that later on. And this is again to apply as educational approaches that can strengthen both formal and non-formal educational activities. With each of those, then there is more further elaboration, including practical tips about what to do if you want to be more context sensitive. What does it mean? Some practical tips. So you see a box with each to elaborate that. I quickly go because I see time is going. Then, as I mentioned, chapter 4 is then a bit more guidance about, okay, this is the educational approach. What can you do? How can you build a program or a learning activity based on this? So it goes into some different sections of it. How do you think about it during planning and preparation? How do you look at what are the learning objectives of the initiative you want to formulate? And then in terms of the designing of the content and delivery of it, how do you focus on and develop learning programs that are transformative? So it tries to bring those pedagogical aspects to more practical and give clear ways that we can look to put it into practice. Chapter 5, as I mentioned, goes then to activities. There's two modules. The first one focusing on building the knowledge, skills, and peace for peace building. And then the second one working together to transform our realities. So if you take one activity, this particular activity talks about stereotypes, biases, and discrimination. It describes the activity and offers some reflection questions and some additional resources. So similarly, there's I think about 15, 16 also or more activities included that can become a wonderful resource for young people to put into practice these ideas and adapt to their realities as well. So from empathy mapping, then quickly to highlight that in the chapter, the more needs in our communities. So the first one is take actions, take lead projects that are related to peace building, preventing violence. For example, this particular activity is called the Dialogue with Boys and is activity that can be run to address issues of gender-based violence, not only engaging young women in talking about gender-based violence, but also having those conversations with adolescent boys about how we can prevent gender-based violence. Similarly, there's different other activities, including thematic weeks that can be run, activities that are related to more economic issues and encouraging entrepreneurship, culture of entrepreneurship across for young people. So trying to offer a range of different types of activities. So let me quickly go to the next section. Again, that's a section of activities includes many, and that's one reason the guide becomes a bit long because it offers all these different activities more than initially planned. As I said, then there are these different case studies that we've tried to gather from different parts of Africa. But again, this is very important that if you can contribute and help to have more case studies, that's going to be very useful so that your own realities are reflected and your work as young people, you've been doing many things around building peace in your community, so that this is also a space for acknowledging that work that you've been doing in education. The last chapter that is around monitoring progress is being drafted, so it's not included in this particular draft. So we will share that in future. But as I wanted to share for now, this is what the guide is. I hope it gives you an overview to start thinking further about it. And maybe as we go next to the small groups to offer concrete feedback. Looking at the number of people we have, I'm suggesting that we go to 3 groups. I invite also some of the staff members from different UNESCO and AU offices and Arigato to join the groups as well. What I propose is that we have one group is in Francophone, in French, and then 2 groups in English. I'll try to create the groups and invite you. While I try to do that, if there is any questions or comments before we transition to the groups where you will have more space to comment and question things. But if there are comments while I'm trying to send you to the groups, please do feel free to open your mics and share. if there have been any questions in the chat also, we can talk about them. Just to confirm, if you are a French speaker, please do let me know so that I'm sure that you are in the right group. There's a group called French speakers. So just to make sure that you're in the right group, if you do speak French, if you can let me know in the chat, then it will be helpful to send you to the correct group.
Suchit, if you don't mind my coming in briefly.
Go ahead, Dr. Rooks.
Yeah, so this is for our young peace builders. I mean, Suchit has gone through the guide, and I think, you know, let's try to lend our voices. I know we're going to go into groups where we'll interrogate this document in chapters, but you know, you will be limited to commenting on the chapter assigned to your group. So I think if you have any comments, preliminary comments based on the presentation Suchit has taken time to make, you know, please voice it. We're here to ensure that this process is participatory and that the final outcomes reflects your voices, you know. So please, this is not the time to be quiet and you know, be docile. So please, I'm just beseeching that, you know, we all lend our voices to this. I've actually stayed on to gauge what your reaction and responses would be, because I have a competing meeting, but I really wanted to be here to see how interactive the youth would be. And I'm encouraging you, you know, again, like we can't emphasize this enough. This is a safe space, and this is a process wherein your thoughts, your ideas, your beliefs, your what you envisage and see for the future of education and youth and peace building, you know, this is the process through which it can come through. You know, a document lives much longer than our thoughts. So please, you know, voice whatever you have inside of you, and let's ensure that this is truly participatory. We don't want it to be you guys were here and then, you know, it's a tick box. This is something you always repeat you don't want. So please, again, don't be part of that process wherein it's a tick box. So please, let's hear your voices, please. Switch it back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Rooks, for highlighting that. And as you also mentioned at the very beginning, this is a safe space. So you don't need to be making very profound comments. Whatever you feel is you are free to share as well. And they don't need to be, you don't need to overthink whether that's technically correct or not, etc. From your understanding is what we want to hear, what you believe should be included and should not be included, what can be improved. So share from where you are, please. Any comments? So let's hear if there is any comments before we go into the groups, any overall comments. And of course, we'll go into the groups and then come back and have again space to share as well. But before we go, if there are any comments, please unmute yourselves and share. Okay, maybe then we will go to first to the groups, and maybe you working on very specific things might be easier. I see also a comment in the chat. If one of our interpreters can translate that for us in English as well. Is it a question that's being asked? Can somebody help?
On the chat, Joseph is saying that he must be in the French group. Joseph Akilimali.
Okay.
And he asked if it's possible to add the guide of the realities in other countries, like in his country, the RDC.
Okay, DRC Congo. So
Yes.
I think that's good feedback. How do we make sure different realities, different countries are mentioned? Of course, Africa comes together to some 50-something countries, and we might not be able to be very detailed about each country's realities, but I think it's important that different realities are reflected. So that's a clear feedback from Joseph, saying that from his context, he would like to see more dynamics related to DRC's reality being reflected on the guide. Thank you, Joseph. Any other comments before we go into the groups? Opubu, please go ahead.
I have nothing at the moment. No, I have nothing at the moment to say.
Okay, thank you. Then let us go to the groups. I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. Please join the respective one. If there is any issue, if you are placed in the wrong room, please message so that we can send you to the correct place. Catherine, are you able to join the group? Corazon, are you able to join the group? And then Frekebon, I'm not sure the pronunciation, but do you hear me? Frekebon or Corazon, are you able to hear me? Catherine, are you able to hear me?
Suchit, I just got disconnected for some reason. Could you send me back into the breakout room, please?
Okay, let me figure out because it shows me. I'm going to move you to a different group and then send you back so that you.
Okay, I'll wait.
Do you see a notification? Yeah. Frekabong Naka. So for the next few minutes, let's hear back from the groups. Can I invite the different groups to share some of the points? You don't need to be exhaustive and go through all the points, but maybe 2 or 3 key points that you would highlight from the discussions you had, because the detailed ones are already recorded. So just the ones that you would like to reflect on a bit more in plenary, if you can highlight for us. The group would like to go first. Go first.
Maybe Sujit, I can start from group 3.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, group 3 was Ayobayo, Karazon, Grace, Orit, Rooks, and myself. And they glancingly looked at the guide so that we went directly to the general kind of comments for all the chapters. And the first comment is on the size of the guide itself. And the guide, especially, the guide is somehow focused on texts and it's somehow wordy. So if there is an opportunity to summarize, especially the first chapters, and to summarize it in a few pages so that it will be more friendly for the use. And also the terminologies and the language used in the guide. And I wanted to borrow the exact word that is, some of the words are somehow diplomatic. So if we make it more easier and more understandable for the use, and to balance between those policy languages and the language that we use for the use, and or if possible also to have definition of terms for some of the important terms. If we have terminology definition, that will also help, and also to indicate the most important policy documents that focused on the use in the guide, so that the use can be aware of the policy support they have on this program. And the second main important comment mentioned was the instruction on the how to use the guide. The guide has on the how to use in chapter 4 talks more about on how to use the guide for the training, but there is a concern that it really needs an introduction on how to use the guide and for whom the guide is organized, especially whether this guide is more for the TOT or it can be also self-help kind of guide that the young person can use to educate or to aware themselves. And there is a need to balance between content and the approach, which we call the pedagogical approach that we use, and to focus more on the active kind of text writing itself, especially supporting the text with some pictures, videos, or graphs can also support, especially when we indicate some activities. These activities can be replaced by pictures and graphs and so on. So these are the main concerns that we have discussed in the group, and also to have a kind of a facilitator guide if for the trainers on how to follow up on the training, and also a kind of flashcard or a kind of summary on each session or in each subtopic or topic, so that people will easily catch up what will be the main focus or what will be the main message of that chapter. So these are the most important points that are discussed by the group. And also the online module, if the module can also be online, and if it can be also accessible for the use through different approaches. And if I miss anything, maybe I will leave the floor for Ayobayo and the other groups to add. Thank you.
Nothing really. You spoke on the most important points that we raised during the breakout session. Thank you so very much for the good job well done.
Thank you. Maybe over to you, Sujit.
Thank you, Yerusalem. So maybe we go to a next group and then we can open up for anybody to comment. So group 2 or group 1 from the French speakers, who would like to go next? Joseph from, can I invite you to share from your group?
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes.
Maybe let me share what we have discussed in our group. Let me wait for the screen. Okay. In our group, we managed to discuss on the issue of institutional capacity, also to respond, to the implementation and also inclusion of education approach that promotes peace building, and how this can influence regional, and continental examination bodies, also influence on curriculum that also include peace building processes, and also placing at the center stage examinations. Also, we discussed on the inclusion of developmental tools, programs, platforms that are web-based as monitoring tools to capture feedback from different institutions and programs, and also include how to share challenges, risk, and also stories from the implemented projects across institutions and also regions. And also we had to recommend the capture of how young people go about their peace processes without endangering their lives. As we know, no project, no initiative is worth more than the lives and also the livelihood of the participants. And there should be a careful consideration on how activities are proposed. We also had to explore the need to consider local and cultural context around activities, in as much as we also need to explore patriarchal versus matriarchal society context, the needs to have a balance when designing projects and activities, as this would equally impact the way we handle issues within the approaches we are likely to take. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nyasha. Anybody else from the group who would like to add or clarify any of these points?
I think I'll just like to clarify the first point. Basically, I think it's necessary to have, to seek ways in which, the regional bodies or the regional examination bodies can include certain peace building curriculum in, like, certain peace building strategies or ways in their curriculum, in order for the institutions to, have, that, to use that curriculum in preparing their, their students to, to pass the examinations, because we know not all institutions have the resources to dedicate, separately to peace building processes and to dedicate to, preparing students for examinations. So it would be good if a curriculum could reflect both. so that there's no duplication, or there is no, there are no two streams to one goal.
Thank you, Apobo. Anybody else? If not, we can go to the other group. Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
From group 2. Something else maybe I forgot to air out. As I was looking through the document, maybe I thought it would also be important to include ways in which these projects or initiatives in different regions can partner with private and public institutions and organizations. That means just maybe highlighting key strategies on the document, key strategies or key pointers that the leaders of these youth-led initiatives can use in order to partner with private and public institutions in the implementation of the initiatives. Because the youth cannot just work in a vacuum. We already have established private organizations, private companies, private institutions, and government ones as well. And I feel that the initiatives and projects would be much more impactful if they have the endorsement of the private space and the public space as well. So maybe just including the key strategies or pointers that the youth can use in order to tap themselves or just hook themselves into with the private sector, maybe in terms of the CSRs, linking the initiatives with the CSRs, or maybe public institutions. So yeah, just key strategies, maybe not going too much in detail, but now which pointers, how a roadmap of how can these youth initiatives just link themselves up to the private sector and public sector.
Thank you, Collins.
Yeah.
Can I invite group 1 then?
Oui, pour le cas du groupe 1, nous avions parcouru les documents et il y avait entre autres recommandations de voir dans la mesure du possible comment rendre les guides accessibles à tous les niveaux des jeunes. Donc, dans le sens que il y aurait certains mots qui peuvent être un peu non adaptés à une catégorie de jeunes. Et donc, il faudra peut-être penser dans la mesure du possible comment les rendre beaucoup plus accessibles à toutes les catégories de jeunesse. L'autre aspect que nous avions essayé un peu de passer en revue, c'était les moyens de suivre les progrès de ces guides. Les moyens de suivre les progrès de ces guides. Il est vrai que c'est un document très, 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 très important pour les organisations de jeunes et d'autres programmes.
So this program will consolidate peace and strengthen peace. And so we will follow the progress of the guide. In order to follow the progress, we will use the help of certain improvements made by the African Union in terms of the continental framework, so that we can use the ambassadors in each region. They have also initiated a regional framework plan for the youth and peace and security. So we can use this network that is already in place to see the improvements linked to this guide. Another recommendation was to examine how we can reinforce this for other countries where studies have not been done yet, so that this document can be more accessible and more inclusive for other regions and other countries. so that we can share different people's experiences in different contexts and different regions all around the continent. For the other aspects, I will let the other members of the group add the other points. Thank you very much.
Anybody else from the group who wants to add or clarify any of the points? Catherine, was there anything you wanted to highlight?
Oui, peut-être je pourrais ajouter le fait
Yes, I could maybe add the fact that at the beginning of the guide, the words are maybe a little too despaired. There is not much positivity. We could maybe start by underlining the good actions undertaken by youths and not just going into negativity. There are at least 6 pages talking about unemployment, extremism, conflicts, violence, etc. So it doesn't give lots of hope that we will one day find solutions to create a brighter future. But what is very good are the practical applications, the different trainings for youths. I think this was very interesting in the guide. Yes, thank you very much. That's it for my comments.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for all the reflections and the sharing in the different groups and also what you brought into the plenary. Is there any general comments at this point anybody wants to make? Overall reflections about the guide? There has been wonderful comments about the language, that it can be more appealing for young people, and that maybe the text can be replaced with more visual representations in some places so that it's more engaging. And then I also read about more examples from different parts of Africa to be included. These are very important comments, and I'm sure we'll work on them as well. Any further reflections while we are in plenary before we move forward? Okay, if you do have, please do share with us at any point. But one thing I wanted to highlight is that the process of feed forwarding and giving feedback will continue as well. So feel free to, now that you maybe, for some of you, it might be the first time you actually went through the details of the guide, take a bit of time to skim through it and maybe even send us more detailed comments as comments to the documents or by email. So we would really love to hear more from you as well. So please follow up this meeting with further feedback as well. There is a form that we've shared as well. You can input your comments there as well. One of the challenges I think for us to really place, and maybe that doesn't come out very clearly on the guide from the feedback what I gather is that who are the main intended users of this guide? I think in the drafting of it, we were not thinking that it's a guide that any and every young person is going to pick up and work with on peace building. But it was more for those who are already kind of leading peace related initiatives, especially to reflect further how the role of education is. So 2 aspects. One is that these are youth leaders, not necessarily youth themselves, but the leaders who will then convey and contextualize things to the youth in their constituencies, in their organizations, in their communities. So youth leaders were the target. Also teachers in teacher training colleges, those who are being trained to be teachers, were one of the target groups of the guide. So not necessarily the general public youth, but more the specific youth who are maybe already trained on YPS, but are looking then in terms of educational related initiatives they can start. So that was, I think, something I wanted to clarify, so that as you kind of take reflections further as well, that we are not necessarily catering for everybody, but a much more specific group. Yes, so if there is anybody who still has a comment or a question, I'm happy to share the floor. I hear somebody's mic. Do you have any comments? If not, maybe I hand over to Jerusalem. Jerusalem, can I hand over to you so that we can discuss a bit about the way forward as well? And in the meantime, I'll share in the chat our email address as well, my email address, that you can share any feedback that you want to send over email as well. And you can do so by writing to Hannah from the African Union or Jerusalem from IGBA. Any of us can receive feedback to the guide as well. Thank you. Jerusalem, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sujit, and thank you all. It was really a very rich comment and reflection. And most of the comments, most of the concerns that we have are really addressed. And now I really wanted to see some of the points, especially on how we can use this guide and how we can implement this initiative. And most of the issues have been really mentioned earlier also, but maybe let us give 5 to 10 minutes to discuss on how we can use the guide and what existing networks or opportunities are there to use a guide and to reach as many use as we are planning. And Corinne was mentioning some kind of strategies that we need to use, especially engaging the private and engaging the other institutions. So I would like you to maybe to discuss this in somehow in a broader sense, so that we can get some insights on how to engage other partners also in the process, and maybe we can start talking or reflecting from our own experiences at the ground, what can be workable, especially on the engaging and in partnership, so that we can reach as many youth as possible, and what additional innovative strategies or ways we can also think of or to reach the use on the ground, and maybe also a little bit discussion on the risks that you are forecasting or the risks that you are seeing in relation to taking this initiative on the ground, and what proposed solutions can we think of when it comes to our risks. I heard that there are some risks that was mentioning in the discussion. So what kind of mitigating strategies can we have so that we can reach to the users on the ground and also fulfill the objective of this initiative? So I will leave the floor open for all of you to reflect, especially on how to use it and what existing strategies or networking systems are on the ground. If you want to speak, you can raise your hand so that I can address you by name. Am I clear on the questions? Anyone who would like to reflect, maybe from your own experience as an organization while you are working with the youth, what opportunities are you experiencing that can help us to disseminate this information, to bring this training guide as a training tool at the country level or at the ground? Or maybe how do you see it if you are asked to use this guide in your context? How do you see its application, and what existing strategies can also support you? Anyone who would like to reflect? Maybe Colin, can I come to you to break the silence and share us somehow how you work on engaging especially the other institutions, the private sectors and so on, both for the resource mobilization and in the meantime also to make sure that the young people are benefited from the project, from your experience.
So yeah, hi everyone again. So in my context, we're using a community approach where our main approach is the use of established. First of all, we're working with the church, established institutions that have positive impact on the society. Let's say the church. That's our main approach. As I mentioned last time, we have established a resource center that now attracts various youths from different backgrounds, ethnic, education, cultural, etc. So instead of establishing an institution or a setup of my own, we are using already established institutions in the community, let's say churches, as resource centers to promote youth education, to promote skills development. So I've seen some of the case studies here, what is being done in different parts of the country, different parts of in Africa, different parts of Africa. So there's some very nice case studies that we can pick some elements from. So yeah, my approach is using established institutions within the community. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Colin. And I can see Joseph raising his hand. Joseph, would you like to say something? Please, please.
Oui, je peux partager aussi les
Yes,
cas.
may I share the case here in the Democratic Republic of Congo? So for using the guide, we have to already use some strategies that are in place. I can see some programs that we already have. First of all, help in schools and in universities to talk about peace and conflict resolution. For us, it would be great to have exchanges and sharing experiences and good practices for the different themes and issues that are talked about in this guide. For the Democratic Republic of Congo, we put in place a strategy of in a school of 150 students. In this program, we developed what we call a homework school. So it was to help us follow the students even after their school day. We were able to help the students. We were helping the children not only to learn the subjects, but it's also the opportunity to explore different aspects of the guide. We are part of civil society. I am president of the youth chapter in our city. It would be a great opportunity to share our experience with other youth groups in my region and see how every different group acts. We also work with governmental organizations, among which the different regional groups and youth groups in our country. So I think we should really use these great advantages that we have in our area in order to make the guide accessible. And we have to increase networking also, so that in some areas, some regions where we cannot reach, we have to find other ways of making this guide accessible. by conferences, by organizing conferences just like this one. So I think in general, we won't have much problems for DRC, but we have to apply it on the road.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. And I don't see any hands on, so maybe just to conclude, if there is any risk or that you think might compromise the implementation or might compromise this initiative, and that needs to be think ahead of time, you are most welcome to reflect on that. Otherwise, I think we are also ahead of time, a bit ahead of time. So maybe not to miss the participation of the people, we can conclude, and we will keep on communicating and accepting comments also. And your comments are welcome anytime. And yes, we have discussed on the community approach, using the established institutions and also the schools, the universities, and also to involve the youth groups or the youth institutions. And Joseph also mentioned the importance of making the accessibility, especially using also this kind of online platform, which is, I think, important and one part of an innovative approach to reach as many youth as possible for the program. And having said that, I think now is a time to think about the action points or the way forward and what we are going to do afterwards. And I can say that this is really a good platform that is created, and we have been in this discussion for the last 3-4 months, and we have in the process we have this is the third dialogue that we have, and the first 2 dialogues focused mainly on the context setting and also on the guide development on the process itself. So I really like to sincerely appreciate and thank all of you, especially the young representatives, the user representatives from different institutions who have been with us for all the dialogues and who have been also responding and communicating with us on the process. And I also like to thank the Youth for Peace section of the AU, Dr. Rooks, Hannah, Oris, and Frex for your valuable comments and also for your collaborations, UNESCO offices, especially Catherine, as you are here with us today also from Dakar office for your important contributions, and of course the Arigato team for coming up and for making this guide to be as comprehensive as possible, and also for creating this platform. And maybe as a way forward, what we are thinking is we are still accepting comments from you all, and still you can send our comments, as Suchit said, you can send it either to Suchit or for me or for Hannah, and we will share our email address also. And once we have compiled all the comments that we are gathering today, we can also share you the final document, and you can look at the final document and for approval also, and maybe we can have that within the next 1 month's time. So, and I really also want to ask some cases, and we as you have seen it in the guide, when you have cases, it's much simpler and much interactive. So especially from the northern African countries, we have very quite limited cases. So it would have been much inclusive if we have more cases from that region also. And please feel free to send us and to indicate us the good practices that are happening also in other parts of Africa. And once we finalize all this, we might convey a kind of training of trainers or a kind of workshop that will engage all of us together and to think more on the especially on how to balance the content and the pedagogical approach. And we might be providing training at the country level. So how we are going to take this training at the country level also needs some kind of discussion. So we may also have a kind of training of trainer session together, so that we can equip ourselves and we can also train other youth at the ground. And as you all said, just also we need to keep this platform going, and our YFP is our main bridge on that. So we also rely on their support and their coordination, and of course the focal persons use at different REX level will also be part of the program. And maybe what I can see is we can keep this platform, and if you all are willing, and we can have also create a WhatsApp group which can be dedicated in particular to this purpose, and to share this information and also to finalize the guide, and also to organize a training on the area. And maybe that can also be led by us and YFP. And later maybe we can also discuss a kind of implementation plan on how to cascade the training at the country level once we do the training of trainers. But basically we focus on finalizing the draft guide and having a tuity, and then implementation plan on how to cascade and how to create a champion at the country level who can lead and who can also be benefited from the small funding that we're going to have for 2021. That's all that I have as a way forward. Maybe if the team from Arigato or from AU, Dr. Rooks, if you have something to add.
Thanks so much, Jerusalem. I think I just put something in the text that
yes.
I think that just expresses the way I feel. So I mean, like you've mentioned, our young cohort have been very, very insightful in our deliberations, and it's just to continue to thank them and look for. I always look forward to opportunities like this when we have to work with them, and I just want to remind them, as I tend to, that they are not our targets, but they're a bridge. You're representing a much wider range of youth peace builders. So please continue to do the great work you're doing, and we look forward to taking this particular project amongst several others forward with your partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Rooks. Thank you, all of you. And Suchit, if you have something to say.
Just a round of appreciations for everyone for joining 3 different dialogues and the time you gave for the process. As everybody said, we really value those feedback, and in the next days, we'll be going through all the feedback we received to really make sure that the guide reflects your inputs as well, so that we have a resource that everybody can feel ownership of and be inspired and use to touch the lives of many other young leaders who can make a difference in your own countries. I think that's the final objective. We want to really make sure that our education is more dynamic and is more connected to peace building needs in our country. So we look forward to working with you in that regard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Suchit. Thank you all. Thank you for the time that you provided, and I hope together we will succeed. And thank you very much. And we will keep you posted on the progress, and we'll keep you sending on emails. And if you are also willing to be part of the WhatsApp group, we will send an email, and you will confirm through email, so that we will have a WhatsApp group to chat on the issue. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.